Kennedy, and he said, the only reason for making a speech is to change the world. Well, after reading that, I was depressed for about 3 weeks after reading that. But I couldn't get it out of my mind. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, honored guests. When I was 13, I lived in Texas. A small town in South Texas, close to Mexico, cerca de Mexico, we used to say. And for those of you who are geographically handicapped, that's in the southern part of the United States. Very far south. As a matter of fact, more people speak Spanish than English. Now, what was I doing there, you may ask? I was 13 years old, living in this place in the middle of nowhere, small town. Well, my father worked for an oil company, used to be of Dutch heritage, and that's where the oil was in those days when I was young. So there we were, yeah. And that Christmas my father said, we're going skiing. Skiing. Well, I grew up in countries that had a tropical or semi-tropical climate. And the only skiing I was aware of was on water. But it was snow skiing. And I thought, well, you know, somewhere in Switzerland there's some yodelers that ski on snow, but of course in those days it was not a very well-known sport. You know, one of the questions I asked my father was, you know, well, where are we going skiing? And how are we going to get there? Because the closest snow was more than 1,000 miles away from where we lived. And he said, well, we're taking the bus. Of course, my jaw fell open. And I said, what do you mean we're taking the bus? He said, well, we have a small car, because my father was one of the first people who was environmentally conscious, and he was one of the first people to buy a compact car, as it was called in those days. And in retrospect, I understand, because the car would be packed, 4 of us. We had to drive more than 1,000 miles, no air conditioning, and it would take 2 days at least to get there. So I thought, he's smart, actually. But anyway, it wasn't that strange, because in those days, traveling by bus was very common, and it was a good way to get around. And some of you may remember the Greyhound bus. Those are the years of the Greyhound bus in the 60s. So, okay, that's the next question was, where are we going skiing? He said, Taos, New Mexico. Taos, New Mexico. Now, we lived in a hole in the wall, but that was even further down in the hole. And besides that, it was about 20 hours by bus, so I really wasn't that enthusiastic, but after thinking about it, and said, well, you know, maybe we should try it, because I was a sports-minded kid, and that was my passion in those days. I said, okay, well, let's do it. So we bought some warm clothes, which I'd never had in my life, and we got on the bus, and it was fairly uneventful, and 2 days later, here we were in Taos, New Mexico, which, as opposed to today, was a small town. Today it's a big resort area, a lot of skiing, very modern, and they only had one ski lift, and they had one slope. Well, anyway, I was getting excited. I said, I don't want to waste any time. I'm going to go take a lesson. So I rushed down to it was a brick house. It was kind of a shop, like what would you call today a shop. And you could get some soup and some coffee, and you could rent some equipment. So I rented some equipment, and I'm convinced it was the same equipment that Roald Amundsen discovered the South Pole in 1911. The shoes were just leather shoes, you know, with a raised top with laces. This plastic ski shoes were just being marketed, and only expert skiers could afford them, of course. And I remember a slogan they had in those days, not that I was aware of it, but I noticed it there on the brick wall. It said, "Are you lacing or are you racing?" But anyway, so I rushed out, I had my first lesson, and have you all skied? Have you all tried it? Who hasn't done it? Everyone's tried it, or you haven't tried it? Well, when you take a lesson, the first thing you learn is something called the snowplow. And the snowplow is the method of slowing down and speeding up. Just put your legs in the V in your skis, you open, you close the V, you go faster and slower. Okay, I did that for an hour and I thought, great, this is it, I can do it. So I canceled the rest of the lessons. The next morning, I was the first one on the ski lift. Now the ski lift, and you all know what I'm talking about, was one of these poles that you hold on to like this. And there's a little metal plate that you sit on, and it pulls you up. So I got on that thing, and I think I was the second person that day. So here I'm going up 20 minutes later, I was down in the snow. I said, "Oh, okay, we'll try it again." Of course, one of the first things you learn, the first thing you learn when you ski, is getting up. Again, and again, and again. Well, I hadn't learned that very well, so I kind of slid down the slope and got back on the lift. And this time it worked. And there was the top of the slope. Now a ski slope, when you're looking up, doesn't look so bad. But when you're looking down, it looks frightening. So I had a moment of crisis. But being young and fearless, I started going downhill. And I went faster, and I went faster, and faster.
Oh, God.
And I was snowplying, but it didn't work. Fortunately, I fell, and I was about that far from the brick wall. The snow too. Of course, my heart was pounding at that moment, and I thought, this isn't so bad. I said, next time it'll be better. So I went up the ski slope again, and this time I didn't fall, and there I was again. And I started going down. And I went faster, and I went faster, and about halfway down, I fell. Oh, it gets worse. And I couldn't get up. And on this one ski was pointing that way, and the other one was pointing that way. And I started feeling numbness in my left leg. And it started hurting. And I thought, what am I going to do now? Because there was no one else skiing. So there I lay there, and finally someone came by, and I started shouting, and he didn't even look at me, he went back down. Anyway, another person came up, he heard me, he said, what's wrong? And I spoke the famous words, I think I broke my leg. They said, okay, we'll help you. And he went down, I didn't hear anything for a while, and finally two people came up with a sort of plastic sheet. It was early in the season, of course. 24th of December, and they kind of slid me down like this. And there I was, down at the bottom of the hill. And my leg was beginning to hurt like hell. Yeah. And then somebody came up and said, the ambulance has 2 flat tires. Oh, yeah, but it's early in the season. We weren't counting on a broken leg this early. I said, great. So what are we going to do? Well, a gentleman came up and said, I have a station wagon. He said, we'll go down the mountain to the clinic. There's a clinic in Taos, and we'll take care of her. And then, by a miracle, a doctor almost showed up. He must have been a skier or something. And he gave me a shot. And they loaded me in the back of the station wagon, and a warm glow came over me. And I thought, this is what they're talking about in San Francisco. And I thought this is what Case was going to talk about, but that was and I felt so good. I realized I was floating, and I told the driver, please drive around a little bit, because it's so beautiful. I mean, it was good stuff. Anyway, before I knew it, I was on the operating table, and the next day, in a daze, somebody came by and said, Merry Christmas. And that was it. That was my Christmas. But the story doesn't end here. Remember, I had to go back on the bus. Yeah. So here I am on crutches. And I have to get on the bus. There are several problems with that, which I won't bother you with, but I ended up sitting in the front seat, a very nice driver, and sitting in the big panorama window with 2 seats, and he got me a little stool, and I put my leg up like this, and I sat like that for 20 hours in a daze. But I do remember a beautiful sunrise, because I sat on the bus all night, watching Roadkill, and seeing the sunrise. And Texas is big. You know how big Texas is? as big as France. You go from one end to the end, takes more than a day, so I watched this Texas for 20 hours. But my problems didn't end there. When I got home, I said, what am I going to do? I have to go to school, and I'm on the swim team, and I play basketball, and I run athletics, and I couldn't do that because I knew I would be on crutches for at least 6 months. So, 6 months. So I had to make a choice. What was I going to do in school? Because in school, of course, you have your standard subjects, but you also have subjects you can choose, elective subjects, you can say. And I didn't know what to do, and a friend of mine who was playing in the school band said, why don't you join the band? Of course, that was not my intention, but I didn't have much choice, and I said, okay, he was a good friend of mine, I said, okay, maybe I'll try it. So I had to learn to play an instrument, and of course it's difficult in the beginning, and after a while I started enjoying it a little bit more, and I started singing, and I started playing the guitar, I started playing in a rock band, and my life was just wonderful after that. But I'm still walking around like this. But anyway, did this ski accident change my life? Yes, it did. You know, we all in our life meet people and have events come over us and things happen to us that can change the direction of my life. This ski accident changed the direction of my life. Was it the worst Christmas ever? Yes. Did it open new avenues, new opportunities, and new areas for me to explore? Definitely. But you might think, so what? He broke his leg. What's in it for me? Well, I suggest maybe that if you have a moment of meditation and a quiet period, look at yourself. Let's look at the people you've met in your life, the things that have happened to you. You may have forgotten some. You may not even realize some of them influenced your life. And then maybe, if at least one of you find some new insights into yourself, John F. Kennedy was right. In a small butterfly type of way, the world has changed.